And welcome to another episode of REDtalks.live. This is episode 31 and part 3 in a series on infrastructure as code. So in this episode, I'm going to go through the install and setup of the infrastructure as code integration so I can show you how I got it up and running. So let's start. I'm logged into my AWS account. This demonstration so far, I've showed this a few times. I've been running on this first big IP at the top, big IP 1. What we're going to do is we're going to spin up a second big IP, which I've set up, given a license key and a management address, and that's it. So it's a brand new one. I've got an IP address down here. The management address is .20, so we'll let that run for a second, let it boot up. And while that's booting up, I'm going to go through the actual release repositories. So before now, I've been focusing just on the GitHub Enterprise copy of GitHub that I've got running. So that's this version down here, GitHub Enterprise version 2.12. So this is github.com, the publicly available version. This is where I've actually released the code. So this is what you need to take and install onto a big IP to get it to talk to either github.com or to get it to talk to GitHub Enterprise if you have your own private version of it. So yeah, you'll notice github.com nps, that's me, and the GitHub Enterprise infrastructure as code webhook repository. So in here, we've got version 0.1-release is the branch that I'm working on right now. The developed code is frequently in states of working and being interesting. There will be a version 0.2 coming fairly soon, next couple of weeks. But what I've got up here is the installation instructions, details on AS3. I've talked a bit about AS3 in the last episode. AS3 is awesome. It's the declarative interface. You install that RPM, and then on top of that, you install the GitHub Enterprise Webhook Server RPM. And with those two RPMs installed on the big IP, you're up and running and you've got everything you need. Another quick recap, I already mentioned iControl-LX is the language extension framework. You write Node.js workers that use those services, and that's how we get this additional functionality. So with AS3, you get a /deploy declarative interface that you send service definitions to, and GHE listener is the webhook listener that translates between GitHub and big IP configuration. There's a bit of a description of what's in here. I've already provided example service definitions for you. You can create your own. AS3 comes with a full schema and all the features and how to implement those. But just to help you get started, I've created this examples directory, which has examples. This is the one I've done most of the demonstrations with. So now we've gone through the layout of that. I'll go through using it. Here's the repo itself that I've cloned. This is my develop branch. So hoping I've left it in a good state. I've got a copy of AS3 in here. I'm probably going to remove that from release branches. When I started development, AS3 was in beta, so I kept a copy of it locally that I could code and work against. Whereas now it's been released. In fact, let's go to exactly where it is. It's not in mine, it's in F5 Networks. F5 App Services Extension is the repo. So this is actually where you should get AS3 from. So you can download the RPM. You notice it's build 34, so it's the same. Download that. So what we're going to do is, let's just have a quick look here. It looks like it's up and running and almost ready for action. I think that's all I really need to show you. So the first thing what we're going to do is we're going to copy the RPMs onto the big IP, and then we're going to install those RPMs. Now in this repository where I put the documentation, I actually go through all the steps of how to do that. So here's the install and setup, installing and then configuring. So the installation setup, once we copy it on there, we're actually going to use the REST API to do API even. It's currently Friday at 5:12 p.m. So forgive me for losing the ability to speak. We're going to use the API of the big IP and its management task worker to do an installation. So we're going to like post this data to the worker, which says these RPMs are sitting in this location and the action to perform is an install. And that's it, really. That's the whole job of doing an installation. Once you upload them to this specific location, you run that install and everything's fantastic. So let's go and see if we're ready to kind of log in. I'm going to just log in as admin because that's the account I created. 31.10, I think it was 20. Let's just check I got the right address. This is like the second time I've ever logged into this. Oh, .1.20 is the management network, not 10. That's useful to know. And look at that, we are there already. Gonna log in. Now I'm logged in as the TMSH, the traffic management shell. I'm gonna jump out of that into Bash because I'm logged in as an admin and I'm allowed to do that. So we'll take a look in this box. Now here's the directory where the iControl LX workers go. So I'm gonna go to var config rest, and then you'll see in here iApps, and then we've got one installed already that ships with a box, but that's it. Now the directory though, where we're going to upload this to, you'll notice I showed in the documentation, was called downloads, which is empty right now. Well, it's got a temp directory, but that's it. So when we were looking at this README, that's where we've got to put these RPMs, is in that download directory. So let's copy them up. I'm going to leave that window open and just quickly open a second window. And we're inside. All I've done is a clone of that exact repo we were just looking at. So you'll notice the same directories: dist, docs, example, license, and source. If we go back into here, they are, it's literally a copy. I've just done a git clone. Well, actually, I did a git push, but you'll do a git clone. Yeah, you know what I mean. So let's go into dist. This is the distribution directory, and here's my two workers. Again, I will probably take the app services one out because that will evolve and update over time. So you should always go to that repository and actually download that directly out of the F5 Networks app services. Get that one from here. Right now we have the right build, so it's fine. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to secure copy both of these, their RPM, so I can take a little bit of shortcut and do that. I'm going to do the destination. It will be admin at 172.31.1.20, and the directory is, you know what, let's be lazy and we're just going to copy that straight out of here. That's right, config rest downloads. Okay, go, password, and like magic, they're now uploading into the Intertron. And there we go, both of them are there. So we've got our other window open still here. We'll do, look at that, magic, they are there. So now we're going to do the install. First, we're going to do the installation of, we can copy this. We're going to do the installation of AS3, and then we're going to do the installation of the webhook server. AS3 is, let's just copy this in, and hey presto. Now, something that you do have to do though is, you'll notice that admin column password isn't going to get us very far. And see my wonderful job of generating random weird passwords. Obviously this box is not on the internet, so you can't hurt it. And off I'm racing. And you'll see in this payload that comes back, it's JSON document, it's not pre-printed. It says install, the install's kicked off, and there's an ID here. So if you really wanted to, you could do a get against that. In fact, let's do exactly that. Where are we? Okay, so let's do that get. We're going to go get rid of the payload, the -d, which is the body. And what I'm going to do is, task, I'm going to paste the ID on the end because that's the job number of what we've just kicked off. Then I'm going to change this to be a get. So now we can see in here, status finished. It's already completed the install. It actually does it really quickly, but I just wanted to show you can actually query the job to make sure it's finished. So it's finished and there's no errors, so we know that that's all fine. So now we can go back and we'll do the install of the GitHub Enterprise Web Server webhook. And okay, that has a slightly longer name. So once again, I'm going to kick that off. You'll see a build number there of 7. I had several release candidates, but I kept adding features. That will change over time. Okay, that's running. I'm not going to check the install log. I'm pretty confident that that's going to run and work. And there's something I want to show you. Actually, this is, you may have seen this before, you may not have. Let's log into this BIG-IP. I don't think I've ever logged into this on the GUI. That looks correct. Using the self-signed cert, we're all good there. Admin. Okay, so here's our totally new, shiny, licensed, never been used BIG-IP. Now, this is a service that's built into the REST API. This is one of the many cool things in here. I can look at the REST API and talk straight to it. So I've redirected to another service on the same box now, which is why I have to log in again. But now I'm looking directly at the REST API's endpoints. I mentioned in a previous episode, talking directly to imperative endpoints. Look at them all. We've got like access policy management. That's for like federation and access. Then we've got GTN, that's for DNS stuff. This is why this is all the LTM, load balancing, and the services and policies. This is why we use AS3. The alternative is I talk to each of these individual endpoints to get this up and running. We've got firewall. We've got denial of service capabilities to mitigate against. We've got just all so many rich features. But I mean, imagine integrating all of that. No thanks. That's why we install AS3. Now, because of the last one I just installed, look at that. These are my shiny new endpoints that I've just installed and put up here. This has no settings, so it's currently just coming back with empty data. So we're going to put some stuff in there. So now that it's running, let's first do a get. So there's 2 endpoints that just got installed. GHE settings. Let's actually just show you where they are. I showed before that there was nothing in that directory. Now we've got these 2 new directories. Let me just print that out a little better. F5 App Services, that's AS3, the declarative interface, and NATE GitHub Enterprise Webhook Server. Okay, if you wanted to take a look, you could then do, let's do that. Node.js is where the JavaScript goes. And look, GHE listener, GHE settings, GHE util. That is exactly what we showed you is in the repo online. Let's go back to here. Source code. This is what's in the RPM. See, there's the directory and Node.js. So when it extracts it, it just installs it. So if you want to see how this works, that's by all means take a look. The settings one is separate because that is the only one that maintains state. The rest of these are just workflows. They use the knowledge of what's in this one stateful worker that does write to disk, it persists, so it will save reboots, etc., and upgrades. And the other 2 just leverage its stateful persistence. Okay, go back to docs. We'll just go back to the installation. We've already done the first step, which was curl. We SCP'd the 2 files up there, and then we use curl to do the install. This shows you how to check if it's okay. Like you get the job ID. This is the response. We did all this, we did all this, we did all that. Oh, you can put like /available to see if it comes up. And if it doesn't error, then everything's good. Okay, so now to the awesome Postman client, I'm going to do a get, and the response I get back, oh, I'm talking to the worker that we already used. Let's go to the new one that I've just installed to, and you'll notice the response is nothing. There is no settings, no state, nothing's been posted to it yet. So let's go back to post. I've saved the data in here. I'm going to tell this one that that's its server, but I'm going to give it its new own account. Let's not use the same token for the other BIG-IP. So BIG-IP 1 that we talked to, which was in .10 address, that's using this token as its own account. we're going to give this big IP a unique account and token because that's just the right thing to do. So we'll log into GitHub Enterprise. I'm going to go in as an administrator because that is the account that is allowed. I am already in a site admin. This is the account that's actually allowed to create users. So I'm going to go into site admin, confirm who I am and that I'm allowed to be there. Okay, now I'm going to go down to all users. So that was the account we had for the other big IP. Now I'm going to do a new one, invite user. I'm going to give it the name of this big IP, the host name. So let's just jump out of there. I'm going to grab it straight out of the GUI because it's up the top. There we go. Now, if I recall correctly, we can't have dots in the username. In fact, let's just confirm I did that last time. Yes, I substitute the dots for dashes. So let's do this and then just quickly, yeah, there we go, alphanumeric. So all I'm going to do is just say, hey, we're all friends, everything's fine. It does require an email address. I've not set up a server with an email address for notification. You probably should, because then when I do the commit logs and the approver needs to know about it, how else are they going to find out that data unless I've actually set up email? For this demo environment, I have not. It's going to tell me it wants an email address. So let's just do natelabs.local because that's my environment. But it's not going to receive that because it's a big IP. It's not a person. It'll never get that email address, and Natelabs doesn't exist anyway. What I really want though, generate password reset link. This is how I'm going to create the account. So this is a kind of one-use link I can now use, and if I go out and create a new tab, I can verify my new account. Excellent. I'm going to give it a password. This is going to be some unique password because nobody's ever going to log in as this person, right? This account is purely so I can generate an auth token and safely use that auth token for access back to my repo. So I've done that. I've created that user account. I've got 2 windows open now because I did that copy paste. The password's been set. So now I can go in as that user and generate an auth token. So let me log out. I should copy that. Did I copy that username? No. Let me just grab that username so I don't type it wrong. Let's face it, I'm probably going to type it wrong if I do that. Here we go. 20. Let's just copy that person. Actually, if I recall correctly, I can't see it right now. There was a feature where I could impersonate a user. I remember seeing that somewhere. I've forgotten where that is. It does exist. I'm going to go in old school way though and just do this. So now that I am this person, I'm going to go into my profile. I'm logged in as the big IP. This is the only time really that you need to do this unless you're using that impersonate user feature. I now need to edit my settings and generate the access token, personal access token, generate new token. Okay, now I'm going to just have repo access. It doesn't have to create repos or anything. That's enough though for me, and I'm just going to go ahead and say, just give me that access. Oops, description. Infrastructure as code access. That's what I called it last time. My bad. Generate token. Okay, here's my token. Again, this is the only time you get to see that token. If I log out and come back in, it's going to hide that. So now I'm going to replace this one because that was the token for the other big IP. Now we're talking to .20, which is big IP 2, and debug's on false. So I'm going to hit send. And hurrah, that's set. These are just related to the iControl language framework, self-link. It's just the right way you should do REST. Great, so now I've got that data. I've literally now set up a new user. I've set up that account so that they can have access. So now I'm going to sign out and I'm going to go back in as IAC admin. There we go, IC admin. So now that I've created that, I'm going to create this new BIG-IP needs to have its own repository. So under IAC org, we are going to go here and we are going to say new repository. And now I'm going to give it a name. Now this needs to match that same string as before. Actually, did this one I have to take the dots out? No, I didn't. We gave it the exact same name. So let's go into this one and look how we did it. Oh yeah, we were able to use those characters. So I'm going to give it the full name this time. We might as well do it the same way, otherwise it's going to look a little weird. Exactly the host name. And excellent, we're back in IAC. We don't want to pin a repository. We want to actually just create a new one. Where did the button go? Create new repository. Hello, where do we do this? Repositories, 3, search. It was there just a second ago. Okay, maybe I'm missing something crazy, but new repository, we'll do it from there. Okay, this is what we want. Okay, done. Public, because this is a private copy of the GitHub Enterprise, so I don't care about it being public. It's only public within my organization. We'll initialize it with a README file and we'll hit create. Excellent. So this is now a brand new repository set up. I've got the access token that I needed before so that my BIG-IP can phone home to here. I'm now going to go into settings and set up the webhook so that every time I paste a new service definition in here, it's going to send it to this webhook's destination. Okay, so what we're going to tell it is the destination is HTTPS 172.31.1.20. That's right, I'm going to put in admin colon and the password /mdmt/shared/neat/ghe_listener. Now, you don't need to remember all of that. I included exactly this information in here during the setup, so you're all good. See, management shared, ghe listener. Here's the configuration. See, we did a post of this information to here. Okay. Where am I? Add webhook. That's what we want. So admin e4db3c hps 1.20 management shared ghe listener. Excellent. We want it to be sent as JSON, the notification messages. I could set up like a reverse kind of security here where I could tell my worker that it has a password as well, like a secret, so that this data couldn't go somewhere else. I mean, I'm not going to do that right now. I guess I could. I am going to disable SSL verification because I'm using a self-signed cert on my BIG-IP. In your environment, you may have your own certificate authority and you generate your own certs. This is a poor man's lab. I don't have that. So here we go, disable us. Yes, I do understand. This is not a public device. It's all fine. All fine. Add webhook. Off and racing. Okay, so that's cool. We've done that. We've set up the webhook. We've told it where its happy little destination. Notice the username password has dropped off, which is nice. And that should be everything that we need to do. In fact, let's just go in. See, it's got a tick. It's already sent a test. You can actually check that it's working fine. When you set up a new webhook, it does send this quick message to make sure. And look, I know my webhook was working because it actually responded saying, thanks for the message, GitHub. Isn't that cool? Isn't that just the best? So I'm not guessing or assuming that it worked. I know that it worked, and I know that I put in the right user ID, etc. So I think we've done everything there. Do we need to? We should probably make sure actually that BIG-IP is allowed to connect it. No, in this case we don't need to because it was a public repository, so it's going to be able to connect back and log in and do a read to get its service definitions. If I made this repository not public though, so I said that it was private, I would then have to add the BIG-IP in here as a user so that it would be able to find it. So in this environment, we're just making anything in IAC org public to the BIG-IPs that have access tokens. I mean, more of a trusted model right here. We could create a team like we did in the last episode where we had collaborators and approvers. Well, I could have another one that was just called BIG-IPs that allowed them to connect back. But again, this is an open one, so it's fine. So let's just test it out. I'm actually going to just try and deploy a service. I don't think I missed anything. Let's just copy one straight out of my example. And off and racing. Commit. Okay. Did I do a good job? Oh look, it worked and it's deployed. So that's pretty quick. I mean, that did not take me long to set that up and get that up and running. And I've already got a deployment that's working. So we log into 1.20. I mean, before, as you saw, I mean, I turned this on just a moment ago and I've built up a configuration and done a deployment and it's there and it's happy. Now, what about troubleshooting? This is something we have not talked about just yet. So I'm on my BIG-IP right now. I'm going to take a look. This is the log that everything gets written to for the iControl LX extension. So there's a daemon called REST node D, REST interface on node, and it's a daemon. We're pretty good at naming things. Right, you can see the last one I did. In fact, this is the startup messages. See, GHE listener dependencies loaded, startup complete. Then a bit further down here, we've got GHE listeners. Settings updated, that's when I did the post with the settings. And here we go, GHE settings, worker reports. So that's the reason it says no key, is it's checking if it was reading anything from disk. Because it was a new install, there were no settings on disk. There are now, because I have given it things to do. And here's a message. So every time you do a deployment, it will write to the log, deploying change to tenant sample 1. And that was sample 1 was the tenant we just created. What if I'm having some problems? What if something's gone wrong in my environment? I really don't know what it is. I mean, I did give that kind of feature where it actually feeds back into here, success error. And if you break it, it will give you an error and the error code. But what if I need more than just that error code? Like if you have a problem and you create a GitHub issue against my public repository with the code saying, it always breaks when I'm trying to do X, the first thing I'm going to ask you to do is enable debug. So let's enable debug mode. I'm still looking at post here to GHE settings. I'm going to change this from debug false to debug true. Now, I don't recommend you leave this on long term. Debug is now true. Generation is 2. Every time you iterate a change, it increments. And you'll see here, GHE settings updated. Let's do a modification to this. See, I keep switching. I get confused. This is github.com public. See the word enterprise is missing, ghe.com. And then I got this one over here is my enterprise copy. Keep forgetting which one I'm on. Happens all the time. In here, service, let's just make a change. Okay, we're gonna add a pull. Let's just do a bit of this. And hit commit. Again, I'm committing to the master just to demonstrate. You would not normally do this. Definitely watch the previous episode 2 in the series. This is how much debug mode throws out. Okay, so you'll see it announces when it gets a message and the repository it gets a message from. Notice that's a standard message. When you put debug on, you get extra messages which are designated by the -debug. So it says things like, okay, the action, it's a modify. There's an add, modify, and delete are the 3 actions that are supported. The definition path, so where it's got the data from, service st1.json. So if I'm troubleshooting and I want to know exactly what file is triggering the problem, I'm going to get that info. From that, it works out the download URL, which is the same in the message above. Also, it parses the results and gets a full URL with the front part, and you'll notice it says raw in there now, and it's got a token on the end. So that's how you actually get to download it. That's the phone home that it does. So it says it's retrieved the URL, and then it's going to use the download URL to fetch the service definition. Fetching service definition, The results of fetching the service definition should be the exact service definition that we just pasted in. In this case, it is. It then turns around and says, okay, in debug again, worker will modify with this data. Then afterwards, again, the declaration. These are all in various points throughout the workflow. So it's the same data. I'm able here to compare if there's anything broken as it's massaging the data, editing fields, changing things, getting ready for deploy. It's iterating through the payload to find out the tenant class that's been specified. It finds it in the end after reading through all the object levels, gets the tenant, says it's going to do a change. And then this is what it's going to push to the BIG-IP. Now notice here we've got two different things. Config is the settings it's got out of the settings worker, and job options is this specific task settings. So we'll see repo name, repo full name, action, def path. So it's come back and forth 4 or 5 times to build out and retrieve all this information with GitHub, and then the service definition itself. And this is actually what it needs to do its job. So it's all this back and forth earlier is to build out this much information, collect this data, and then use the service definition and this data to then go talk to the BIG-IP. So then it says we are going to do a deploy, and I'm sending all of this to the BIG-IP, and then down here it's got the response back from that deployment. Success. Notice that's exactly what we're pasting into the create issue method. So then we come down here and deployed to BIG-IP. This is the results. Again, same thing. However, now at the end of job ops, we now also have added the tenant it went to and the results. So job ops have everything we sent plus what came back now in this single object. And then it goes off and it creates the GitHub issue and says, this is what I'm sending to GitHub issues. So it's every single step back and forth through the entire workflow. Now you can see why I would say don't leave debug on, because it's going to put that much data in your log for every single change you make. So we're going to turn that off, and I'm just going to show now, if I go back in to that particular service definition, I'm going to come in here and make that change. And now you'll see I'm back to just getting that small subset of information. So I think that's enough for kind of this episode. It literally is that simple, those steps for me to create a new setup. I've created a repository using the host name of the BIG-IP. I've created a user account, which has been given an access token, a personal access token. I've then, after doing the install of the RPMs, sent the access token and the IP address of where it's got a phone home to. So that's just my GitHub Enterprise. This could be github.com, but your BIG-IP would need TCP access to github.com and a route back. And done. That was everything I did. And then I did a demonstration of debug mode, enabling and disabling, just so you can see how that works as well. So there's another episode done. This is episode 3 in the series of REDtalks.live. I think this is REDtalks.live episode 31. I think that might be the end of the series. I'm not sure. We'll see if people come in and ask any more questions about how else they can work with this solution. Okay, so thanks for listening. Bye.